Hello and welcome to the Responsibility We Carry Athletics Support Service Learning Series. I am your co-host, Travis Ballard, and I currently serve as the N4A ECC Institutional Partnership Program Chair. And our other co-host today is Mr. Quadro Steele, who serves as our co-chair for the ECC IPP Committee, and Ms. Lucy Mason, who serves as our ECC IPP Learning Series Director and Editor. Today, we bring you part 2 of our learning series on new administrators, and we have the big 3, as we like to call, young leaders in the intercollegiate athletic space, and more importantly, from what we have gathered from their mentors and individuals that provided us with their names, just great human beings. So we would like to welcome Lexi Walters, Assistant Director of Student Athlete Support Service at Ohio State University, Marcus Jaget, I hope I said that right, Marcus. We'll go back around on that. Athletics Academic Advisor at Indiana University, and John Alvarez, Athletics Academic Advisor at Texas Christian University. Welcome and thank you for joining our show.
So I get the privilege of introducing Lexi Walters, former rowing student athlete at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she double majored in exercise and sports science and public relations. Also, fellow graduate of Temple University Sports Business Program for her master's degree, where she served in a variety of roles, got a lot of experience from being an academic mentor to a strategic communications assistant to also a student athlete affairs intern. Upon graduation, she then went on to Florida State University, where she served as an assistant academic advisor, working with football student athletes. She then went on to Georgia Tech, where she served as an academic support coordinator. And currently she works at The Ohio State University, where prior to her recent promotion to assistant director, she served as a senior academic counselor.
All right, so I have the privilege of introducing Falarancho Marcus Jegede. People call Lamar Jackson the Marcus Jegede of jumping. This man, all-star at Louisville, all academic ACC, joined the team, then all-star team at Louisville as an intern right after. Always great when star student athletes become star interns. Then joined the star intern team where they first met up with the big 3 at Florida State. Did some time at Mississippi State and is now at IU, Indiana University, turning it out. Welcome, Marcus, to the show.
From my sources, aka my wife, I get to introduce Mr. Jonathan Alvarez. Mr. Jonathan is originally from Mesquite, Texas. Yes, the mesquite you put on your barbecue, that Texas. Yes, and the brother could ball. He's a former football player. Highly touted football recruit coming out of high school, offensive lineman in the trenches, went to Boomer Sooner Country, the University of Oklahoma, football student athlete, received bachelor's degree in communication. And then this is our irony. He loved Oklahoma so much and Neighborhood Jam. For people who go to Norman, Neighborhood Jam is the place. He decided to even further his education at OU and received his master's degree. From there, he also completed the graduate assistantship program, and he currently serves as the athletic academic advisor at TCU with our good brother, Mr. Sean Worthen.
So we'll jump right into it. And, I'm a former student athlete as well. And so I'm curious to hear from other former student athletes that end up getting into our industry. Was there someone or a certain moment that maybe shifted your career trajectory and motivated or inspired you to want to be in athletic administration, and more specifically academics? Because I will say this is probably the job that people don't think of as much. And so what were those experiences for you all? And we'll start with Lexi.
I'd say before going to college, I didn't really know this career path existed. I think a little untraditionally, I think I became interested in working in student athlete academic support through my student athlete development advisor in college. They were housed in the same office, so I spent a lot of time there, and she was really influential throughout my college years, and I kind of was exposed through like proximity to the academic office because The way it was kind of set up in my institution, not everyone was required to go meet with their advisor frequently. So it was kind of like on my radar, but I wasn't super immersed in it. And I think more specifically, I knew I was in grad school and kind of saw through the Resnick Center, which you have experience with, kind of how hands-on and how much influence you can have on a student athlete's life. I think that was more impactful to me because I always knew I wanted to work in athletics, but I also wanted to be able to, something that I'm really passionate about is making an impact and affecting other people's lives. And I think there are other ways that you can work in athletics, but I think this is one of the most direct ways that you can do that.
Very similar to Lexi, had no idea this was a thing prior to going to college. Unfortunately, I was the typical football athlete. You know, I'm here for football. This is stepping stone. I have greater things in mind, or so I thought. It really took my two advisors, Annette Moran and Miss Toya Ballard. They're the ones that really helped me open my eyes and realize there's something past just the moment of football. It forced me having to be medically retired and then trying to refigure out my life and my goals of what I wanted. And then, I mean, like I said, those two ladies are really the reason why I do this. Try and stay in contact as much as possible because I know, I mean, those are still mentors to me today. But that's why I tell my student athletes every day in the office, at least every week. It's like, I don't do this for the money. I don't do this for the accolades. I do this for you because I understand how this system is, and I understand ways that it can fall in ways that it prospers. And I want to kind of uplift those ways and make the situation better for them in any way I can, essentially.
Yeah, I think similar to that, the people for me, it's like a handful of people that kind of really, push me in this direction. Specifically, Alyssa Murphy at Louisville, she was my guiding star. I was that same student athlete my freshman year. I wasn't going to class. I wasn't doing X, Y, and Z. And they were like, you're going to lose this $10,000 scholarship if you don't get it figured out, yada, yada, yada. And she really kind of, forced me to really understand who I was. She wasn't my advisor. She was actually our student athlete development director at the time. But she really, I would sit in her office and she would really just tell me exactly what I needed to be doing at the times. But the main thing that kind of pushed me in this direction was kind of seeing, a lot of my teammates and my closest friends not figure it out, in time while they're in college. I think seeing a lot of my teammates who, maybe aren't the best students, but they have probably like some of the best like hustle qualities that I've ever seen out of people, like as far as what they're willing to do to be successful, but they weren't applying it to the things that they needed to be, seeing them maybe not graduate. And there's one person in particular, I'm not going to name obviously, but there's one person in particular that I keep in my mind every single time a question like this comes up, because, this guy is really someone that I wish I could have seen do better in college. And so I kind of want to be, not that our academic advisor at Louisville did anything wrong, but I kind of want to be that person that can, kind of like John said, I just want to be there to help in any capacity, in all the capacities. I'm writing cover letters. I'm helping kids talk through how to, talk to their coach about asking for more money. I'm here to talk to kids about how they can talk about transferring, since that's a really big topic lately. And so I just really feel like if I could be helpful, that's what's really keeping me here.
Definitely got to jump in, as I was hearing you all talk about some of the administrators that, played a role in, you getting to this point. I got to give a shout out to Mr. Quadro, still on the call, because he was that person for me when I was in college and had those conversations with me where I was trying to figure things out and gave me opportunities. So I definitely was like, I got to give the shout out to the person that has played a big part in me being in this field.
We ain't supposed to be crying and stuff on these things, right? But I will tell you that my first 5-star recruit was Miss Mason, because there absolutely no way she should be doing this work. And I'm sure your people have been saying the same about you all. She could be president, astronaut, anything else. So when you all get into this field, it is a big deal. So I really appreciate you all. And I like what you all have said about not seeing your teammates or seeing people not take advantage of it. That's exactly why I got into the field, because I think there was more that we weren't aware of about the business. And so that really leads into my next question for you all. You spent time as an athlete, and then you jump into the intern and administrator's role. What was that thing that shocked you about what goes on the other side of the table? So something that maybe you didn't know, or conversations you didn't know were happening as an athlete that when you were an administrator, you were like, wow, we really are dealing with this or talking about this?
I wouldn't say there was one thing in specific, but just the way the communications line worked between the staff and the coaches and the other support staff, the other departments. That was something I was honestly never aware of. I mean, because I got all my information directly from my coach, directly from my mentor. Those were my two lines of communication. But just seeing all the administrative duties that come along with this job on the back end, it was eye-opening for me. One of those things, like, initially as a student athlete, I had no idea what PTD was. I had no idea what 6, 8, 9, any of that was. I mean, it was yeah, as long as I go to class, I'm fine. But I think that was the biggest adjustment for me, was actually realizing, oh, there's a lot more to this than just the mentorship piece. And I think that's what a lot of the young professionals really kind of find out on their own as well. It's like, oh, there's more to just being a grade checker. There's more to just being a mentor, a study hall mentor, things of that nature. I mean, yes, those are important. Those are big pieces of who you are, and they'll help you later in your career. But just learning early on what the rules are, the understanding, diving into it. Yes, they're not the most exciting things, and yes, they change every so often. But I think that was the hardest part for me, along with just being, I guess, so close in age to these student athletes and building that separation of professionalism and still being someone they can rely on and confide in.
I would say, I think of two things in addition to what John said. I think one, I think also coming from like a rowing student athlete background, and I think generally rowing tends to be a higher academic achieving team. So I think I, as a student athlete, wasn't exposed to as many of the students that had more needs in skill building and like time management and organization and things like that. So I think being on the other side, being exposed to students that require more in-depth skill building and things like that was an eye-opener, because I think as a student athlete, I didn't experience it that much. So I think learning how to, one, develop relationships with those students, how teaching myself and asking people how I can best support these students, because I wasn't familiar with it, was something that I had to learn about. And I think also the politics of athletic administration. I think obviously we are all here to support our students, but there's also the priority and like learning how to balance, how to support the best interests of your students, but also like your office, your administration, the coaches in some aspects. So I think learning that balance, because I think as a student athlete, it's easy to think like, oh, hey, I asked my advisor this, and it's easy to be like, oh, they're only concerned with me, but they're concerned with balancing the coaches, the support staff, the sport admin, the executive director of the department interests, all of those things. So I think learning that balance, and it's different everywhere, and always being flexible to that.
I basically say the same thing. For me, I think one of the things that, because of the type of student that I was, one of the things that was most confusing to see on this side was how like challenging it actually is. And I think that goes to just say how good my academic advisor was in college, because she made it look, shout out Courtney Hines, she made it look very easy. But the amount of things like, you have to be detail oriented, and when it's something that's like, maybe, because I've been burned once. I already got caught, I already messed up in one capacity in my career early on so far. And I was able to resolve it, but it was the smallest little detail where it's something that if you're new to the institution and there's one little specific policy that you're not 100% familiar with, bad things can happen for your students. And obviously, making sure that those things don't happen is our job. And so I think realizing how important it is to quadruple check things and how easy some people can make it look was the most surprising thing to me.
One of the things that I enjoyed in researching this topic, particularly each of your experiences, your careers are intertwined. Like the way that you establish knowledge, the internship process at Florida State, and then you all went into the field. What I would love to, learn, and I know a lot of our viewers who are entering into academics would want to know as well, what was that 30 to 90 day process like? What did you utilize so that you could be your best self, or the best advisor you could be in that capacity when you're so new? We can start with, we'll start with Lexi.
I think my background's a little unique because I've never done any real advising until I went to Florida State. I think John and Marcus can attest to this. I ask a lot of questions. So I think that is something to not be afraid of doing, because I think most people that want you to succeed would rather you ask a question and get clarification before you spend too much time going down the wrong path. And I think asking questions also helps your coworkers build trust in you, knowing that you want to do well and you want to know their perspective because they have the institutional knowledge that you don't have yet. So I think that is something that really helps me because obviously, I mean, I know people say there's no such thing as a bad question, but I think if you show that you do a little prior research or come with like a suggestion and then ask a question, rather than just being something that's an easy Google search and you're asking people questions and wasting their time kind of thing. So I think asking like tactful questions about things and maybe having a running list and knowing who you can ask those questions to and who knows all the stuff about admissions, who knows about transfers, who knows about how this coach operates, so you can be tactful in that.
Completely agree. It's one of those things that our intern director, Charlie Hogan, actually really tried to instill in us is just be a sponge. No matter how long you've been in this field, whenever you switch institutions, there are things that are unique to that institution. Yes, there's the overarching rules that we all follow for PTD and eligibility, but there's the unique university specific rules that you have to learn. So I mean, that's the biggest thing that even when I switch universities, I still take with me. It's take the first 30 days and really just be a sponge. Be a sponge that knows one word, and that word is why. Why do we do this? Why does this function that way? Why is this our approach to this? Why is this happening in this order? Just things of that nature, because then it's like Lexi says, you're showing the interest, you have at least that prior knowledge of the basics, but wanting to know why is it progressing the way it is? Why are we as a department progressing this way? Just showing that involvement, that investment in just you and your staff, I think is really big. But like I said, just being a sponge, that was the best thing I could have done for myself, was just sitting back, observing everyone walking around, going into people's offices, having conversations, things of that nature, and just trying to get a vibe of not just the staff, but of the university.
And I can co-sign everything they just said. There's all things that I think all three of us probably do. We both, all of us have actually all changed institutions. So I guarantee we've done those things at each institution we've been to. But I would just like to add, I think adding to that, building relationships, I think, is one of the more important things that I've kind of had to develop, because they know, but I'm not much of a outgoing people person. You know, I'm not looking to like really have too many conversations and make too many strong relationships. It's not something I'm good at. And so one of the things that I think is helpful is to work on building those relationships with those around you. Because you know, one thing, you never know when you might need a favor from the tutor coordinator. Have you talked to the tutor coordinator outside of just requesting a tutor, you know, and just working on those things when you're asking those questions. Just, I'm very lucky. My partner, she brings in cupcakes and cookies, and that's a good way for me to get into people's offices outside of, you know, just going in and saying hello, because I struggle with that kind of thing. So building relationships, I think, is something that's really important, on top of obviously asking all 1,000,001 questions, which we all should probably do more of.
As former student athletes and as people in that academic advisor, academic coach space, we oftentimes talk with our student athletes about time management, right? And you've got to understand or prioritize when you're going to get certain things done. And so one of the things that I know I struggled with and am doing better at now, but is figuring out what that balance or integration looks like of work along with personal life and the other things that you want to explore. And so when you're new, it can sometimes feel like you have to put in those extra hours, and you know, you got to be there from 8 a.m. until 9 or 10 at night, because you're just trying to prove that, you know, you are here for the right reasons and you can add value to the team. And so I'm curious, have you all been able to establish those boundaries to help with that balance or integration? And if so, what are they?
I guess to start off, now that I guess I supervise a couple people now too, I really try to stress the work-life balance, because I'm a firm believer, if you are not at your best, you're not going to be able to support your students as well as you would be able to if you were. So I think at least our office does a really good job, especially with football. We have night study hall of like flexing out time when you have it. So if you come in an hour late, leave an hour early kind of thing, where your schedule works, because I think, like you said, there is that pressure, especially depending on what kind of sports you work with and what their schedules look like, to put in extra time all the time, especially when you're new. But I think there's a difference between being tactful and effective with your time when you are in the office and communicating like, hey, I have this coming up. This is something that's important to me, and communicating that with your supervisor and colleagues so they also know, because I think there is the stigma of like, if you're not in the office, you're not doing work kind of thing. And I think that is something that's hard to break. And I personally I struggle with it. It is something that I am working on too, but when I'm out of the office, being less on my phone, but I don't have a work phone. So that is something that is tough for me to decipher, but it's like one of those things, is this 8 p.m. text message urgent, or will it be the same urgency at 8 a.m. tomorrow kind of thing? So I think communication with your coworkers and supervisors can help you create that balance, because if they know like, hey, I play kickball every Thursday at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So like, if you reach me, I am unreachable, like that kind of boundary. Like, I don't think you need to share every piece of your personal life with your coworkers, but that helps you if it makes you feel better about taking that time for yourself when you usually might be answering things. I think that helps a little bit with time management, but I do think it looks different for everyone. I have some coworkers that believe in work-life integration instead of balance. They think for them, it feels better when they're like, hey, from 7 to 9 p.m., I will be answering things, but from 5 to 7, I'm putting my kids to bed and feeding them and da, 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 da. That works for them. For me, after a certain time, I like to try to decompress so I can be present at 8 a.m. the next morning. So I think it depends on the person, but I think communicating your needs is the first step to that.
Honestly, Lexi kind of killed the question on her own. So I'm really just going to be echoing a lot of what she was saying. Like she said, when you first enter this field, you have that workhorse mentality. You have that, I have somewhere I need to be, things I need to get. So let me put in the work now and show who I am. I think that was the hardest part for us as interns at Florida State. It was really trying to find that balance. It was, I mean, we were treated as essentially a full-time advisor. We had a caseload of students, and it was like, hey, go. If they need something, they're coming to you. And I think that was just the pressure of that, and being first time, like really doing something in this field of that nature. It was a lot. So it put a lot of pressure on us to really just put in an extra time and be great. I remember we would be, as interns, the first people in the office. We didn't even have the key to the door. We'd be sitting there waiting for about 10 minutes for someone to come open it for us. I think that was the hardest thing. I didn't really start to understand or appreciate work-life balance until my stint at the Ohio State. It wasn't until my former supervisor really sat me down and said, there's rarely ever an academic emergency. If you have a student athlete reaching out to you at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, freaking out, I mean, honestly, at some point, depending on the situation, that's on them. If you're waiting till the last minute, you can reach out to me and freak out, but it's not like me reaching out to somebody on campus, a professor at this time of night, going to do anything. We won't get a response until the morning. So it just leads into those things. But I mean, thankfully for me here, I have a work phone. So I think that really helps my work-life balance. I'm able to, I'll keep it on me because I have guys who, of course, working with football, I'll get calls 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, whatever time, really odd hours. But I've told all my guys, I even have a schedule set for do not disturb on the work phone. Once it hits 9 o'clock, 9 p.m., it's staying on the kitchen counter. It's plugged in, charged, ready for me to get up in the morning and grab it. They understand that I have a life. I mean, like I said, just having those communications with your staff, with your students, they know I have a life outside of football, outside of just being an academic advisor. And so they just giving them the opportunity to respect those boundaries, I think, was the biggest thing for me. Saying, hey, I may not answer you right away, but I will look at my phone, I will see your message, and I will get back to you. It's not like I'm just neglecting anything you're saying. I just need time for myself. Like you said, the biggest piece is finding how you decompress. When I was living in Columbus, I played in 3 different sand volleyball leagues. I was playing 3 times a week. We had kickball, we had flag football on weekends. So just really finding where your niche is and where your little group is within your area, and then finding that balance of really setting those boundaries, I think was the hardest part for me.
I think for me, one of the harder aspects of time management when it comes to this sort of field is that I worked for a learning specialist when I was an intern at Florida State. And so you kind of develop this emotional piece where you feel like, all right, if I don't support them in this time, in this moment at 11 o'clock at night, right before that submission is due, then, you know, that's on me. And obviously it isn't, but that's kind of the feeling that you get when you're working with these kids and you see them working very hard and they struggle for a specific reason. And so I think that's why I'm not doing that anymore. But that was one of the main challenges when I was working as a learning specialist, was finding that time management. I've never truly struggled, especially since, you know, as a GA, you kind of feel like you have to just do whatever you're told. At one point I was told I shouldn't take lunches, you know, because my students might need my time during lunches back in the day, you know, and I think that's just one of those things where kind of gets to my point. I think a lot of what they said is so correct, but I think it's kind of difficult to have good time management when you don't have a good support system around you. And I think, especially being here at IU, like I was surprised, like in the best way possible, that like the crew here, no one answers after 6 o'clock. You know what I mean? Like, unless you're a learning specialist with that's that life, but no one really is looking for you after a certain period of day, or like if you need to leave because you're not feeling good, or if you need like to take a day, like no one asks questions. No one's pressuring you to make sure that, you know, we have this thing, you have to be at the staff like this. It feels really nice to have a good support system where the people around you are also encouraging the healthy balance between work and between, you know, your life, because obviously we can't, like they said, we can't be right for our students if we're not right in our lives. And so I think making sure that the group around you has the same idea, you kind of have to get lucky, but I think that's what's been very helpful for me since coming from Mississippi State, where I worked football, where I was there at 7 a.m. and I didn't leave until 6 if I got lucky. You know, that's just a different world with football, obviously.
I have a quick follow-up before my next question. You all seem to be formulating what your, not perfect, but your ideal working environment is at a young time in your career. Would you all say that that's the case? Do you all have things that now for your next positions, and you all have moved to different ones, do you have some non-negotiables now in terms of what your work environment would be? Would you be willing to share them?
I would say now that I've been spoiled with one, a work phone would essentially be a non-negotiable. Just having that separation, I think, has been the biggest help for me. It was a lot when I was at the Ohio State, and I'm having guys text and FaceTime my personal phone at odd hours of the night, on weekends. I may be out with family, and I feel like I have to answer this. And it's really just them, oh, I need help with the wording on this. I need help with this submission. I can't download it. And I'm like, okay, well, I think that's the biggest piece. But outside of that is just what I did when I got to my current institution at TCU is I really first week sat down with my supervisor and was like, hey, I work out in the morning. It's part of my daily routine. It's part of my work-life balance. It keeps my psyche, keeps me sane, and I have a dog. If I'm coming in at 8:30 in the morning regularly, that's my come-in time. I just want to set that precedent with you so you don't think I'm coming in tardy. I mean, regardless, I'm staying in the office till 6:30, 7 sometimes on average. So I'm giving the time back. I'm working the weekends with recruiting. I have during football season, fall weekends. So really just setting that precedent with my supervisors of, hey, I'm not tardy. This is just my normal arrival time because I have so much to do to start my day, or else I won't, like it says, I won't be my best self in that moment.
Next question is, can you talk to us, projecting the names of the innocent? Tell me about your first difficult conversation as an administrator.
I had a student that I guess was told that they could graduate a couple semesters before they actually would be able to, and were very invested on that graduation date because they had future plans for themselves, and they were told they were going to graduate fall 22, and they're actually not graduating until fall 23. So it was a big difference, and I inherited the student and had to tell them that they were not graduating when they thought they were graduating. And I think that was a really tough conversation because they had planned things for those semesters when they would still be in school, and they had told their whole family, they had communicated all of that stuff. And I didn't know that they thought they were graduating then. So when I told them kind of casually, they were like, it rocks their world. And I think that was really difficult because, one, I was not prepared to have a difficult conversation because I didn't think it was going to be. And I think the student was not prepared and kind of felt like that they were told things that weren't accurate. I think it was a misunderstanding from many sides. So I think that was really hard, because then it also had to become a conversation with the coaches and things, because I guess they were under some impression that they were graduating earlier as well. So I think there were a lot of components that I initially wasn't ready to have that conversation with, and then the student was really upset. It kind of worked out because at the end of the day, it's a better situation for the student now. But I think that was really hard, because you never want to surprise people with information, especially something that significant like graduation. So I think that is something that I learned, to try to be as prepared as you can. You don't always know when a difficult conversation is going to come across your desk, but if you can be prepared and try to be as like neutral as possible, because I think even though I may not express it outwardly, I'm very like, it's like a duck, like they're calm on the top and their feet are just like this underneath all the time. So I think that is something that I try to do, because when somebody else isn't calm, like I think having a calm, trying to be calm kind of helps diffuse the situation. But I think that's something that I recently navigated.
I've actually had a few, I mean, because we're talking about difficult conversations. In my mind, that can go different ways. The most recent one I had, we had a student athlete who was in grad school. It took a lot to get this student to graduate for their bachelor's, and they had a couple extra years due to COVID and things of that nature. So they decided, I'm gonna stay, continue playing the sport, and just pursue a master's program. They got into the first term of the master's program, were only enrolled in 9 hours. We ended up having to drop him down to 6 because he wasn't doing anything in any of the classes, and we felt it would be better just to lighten up his academic load and just kind of put more time on his schedule for him to come into study hall and work with us. It got to the point where every week he wasn't doing anything, was just coming in, sitting on his phone. We were getting no true support from the student. He was telling coaches one thing, telling us the other, and so it was a lot of mom and dad. But long-winded way of saying that we reached the end of the fall semester and it looked like the student athlete was not going to be eligible. And obviously we had a pretty phenomenal year this past year. So I think that really kicked in for the athlete, made him realize, oh, there's a shot I'm going to be left behind. Maybe I should kick it in gear. And it was really difficult to see the last month or so of the semester, the student really come in every day, work really hard, and really, pardon my French, but really bust his ass and really get these assignments and these grades done. And then on the back end, have to have that difficult conversation of still, hey, I know you've tried, but there's nothing we can do at this point. You've put yourself in such a deep hole. We're going to end up being ineligible after this semester. And I think that was really difficult for that student to accept, and really weighed heavy on him. And I mean, it weighed heavy on me, but I think that's one aspect. But then the other end of the spectrum is the difficult conversations of when you work with Olympic sports who have those emotional needs. I've had rowing at my previous institutions, and I have beach volleyball currently. So I have my girls who come in and they'll freak out about having a B+ on exam because of what they believe that's going to do to the GPA, what it's going to do to their admission into med school, into PT school, and just having those conversations of, okay, yes, I appreciate your high standards for yourself, but let's sit down and talk it through. I mean, it's A&P1, it's anatomy. It's going to be difficult. This is the weed out. You have a B. The class average was a C-. Let's take the blessing and roll with it. But I think that's the hardest thing, is dealing with those emotions where these students have such high expectations for themselves and not giving themselves the grace of, well, this is college. It is a different level.
I think for me, difficult conversations with students they're not, for me, that's considerably easier because, students are more likely to just listen and understand, and, for the most part, at least. So I haven't had too many. My difficult conversations usually have come with coaches and coaching staff. Just as an example, I have a student who is incredibly talented, or had a student that was incredibly talented, but more of an athlete student than a student athlete. And so the student was struggling, and I was relaying we have an academic liaison, and I was relaying all this information about how the student's struggling to our academic liaison for that sport. And I'd go to the staff meetings and we would talk about these things, or to the team staff meetings, we would talk about the issues. And the head coach usually wasn't there. Head coach shows up at one of the meetings. I'm relaying all the same information that I relayed every other week, and the head coach is surprised. Now my chest is pumping. I'm nervous. I'm like, okay, here we go. What did I do wrong? You know, were you not, what did I miss? And so I'm having to like backpedal and explain the last 2 or 3 months of what's happened with the student, because apparently the liaison hadn't been communicating everything with the head coach. And so I had to have a very, very hard conversation with the coach about why this was happening. And, you know, I kind of took some fault for not including him on the emails. And now my emails include the coach, all the coaches, everybody gets this email about this, all the students every single week now. The standard was just the liaison got them, but I don't care anymore. Everyone gets it. But I had to have a very hard conversation about why this was happening and why I was under the impression that things were being relayed. And so I think those are typically where my hard conversations come from. I have students in here crying all the time, and that's one thing. But I don't think, at least for me, I'm more adept at handling that than a frustrated coach. So.